For 3 years, Wilson family dinners had followed a predictable script. James flaunted his latest luxury buy, Rachel casually bragged about their Hamptons getaway, and my parents smiled proudly at their golden son, then looked at me with gentle disappointment, as if I were a stray they couldn't quite place. I pushed my pot roast around my plate, tuning out the chorus of admiration as James launched into a speech about his brand new Porsche. "You should see it, Sarah," he smirked. "I'd offer you a ride, but..." His eyes swept over my plain outfit. The insult didn't need to be said out loud. "Thanks, but I have meetings with some property managers tomorrow," I replied calmly. Rachel arched an eyebrow, her voice syrupy sweet. "Still juggling that little apartment downtown? If only they knew." That little apartment had been my first investment, bought with every dollar I'd saved after years of cutting corners and grinding in real estate. What they didn't know was it was only step one. "Something like that," I said, sipping my water. Mom leaned in, eyes full of worry. "Sweetheart, we're just concerned. Everyone your age is settling down. Even Emily just bought a lovely place in Oak Park." James chuckled, slicing his roast. "Can't even afford a house. Should have stuck with corporate law, like Dad told you. But no, you had to follow your passion." I turned toward the window, watching as a realtor finished planting a for sale sign on the neighbor's lawn. That sign would be the first of many. "My block, actually," I murmured. But James was too busy recounting his latest courtroom win, while Dad nodded and Mom topped off everyone's wine. My phone buzzed. "Property manager, all paperwork finalized, ready to proceed with phase 2. I smiled and typed a simple reply, "Yes." "Sarah, are you even paying attention?" James snapped. I said, "You could at least rent something decent if you'd let Dad help." "I'm fine, James." Rachel laughed. "Fine? You live in that cramped apartment above your building." "Strategic," I corrected her. "Living on-site helps me stay close to the market." Dad set his fork down. "Sarah, honestly, what do you have to show for all this real estate stuff?" "Your brother owns 3 houses," Rachel added proudly. "4, James corrected, "just closed on a lake house." I stood and walked to the window, watching the realtor outside adjust the sign. Tomorrow, signs would go up all around the block. "Do you know what's interesting about this neighborhood?" I asked, turning back to them. "Property values have risen over 40% in 2 years, quietly, because most sales were private, handled through an LLC called Aurora Properties." James rolled his eyes. "And why would we care?" "Because," I said, opening my laptop and turning the screen toward them, "Aurora Properties is mine, and as of this morning, it owns every house on this block, except this one." I nodded toward our family home. "Oh, and Mrs. Peterson just accepted my offer." Silence fell like a curtain. James's fork dropped to his plate. "What?" Mom breathed. I clicked through portfolio listings, apartment buildings, commercial spaces, residential neighborhoods, all under my company. That tiny apartment building, it was the start. While you all worried about me, I was building something, quietly, patiently, one property at a time. Dad looked stunned. "How many do you have now?" 212, I said, "another 40 under contract." Rachel froze, wine glass halfway to her lips. "But, that means that your poor, struggling sister-in-law is one of the largest property owners in the city," I finished. "Funny how appearances work." James jumped up, knocking his chair back. "This is a joke, you're making this up." I motioned to the window. "You'll see tomorrow, when the rest of the signs go up, everyone will know who owns this block." No one touched their food again. Dinner was still on the table, but what they were chewing now was reality, and they didn't like the taste. James paced. Rachel frantically Googled Aurora Properties. The dining room hadn't changed, but the balance of power had. Mom sat motionless, her wine glass untouched. Across the table, Dad was scrolling through my laptop, eyes wide behind his reading glasses. 212 properties, he muttered. Office buildings, retail, entire residential blocks. He froze. "Wait, River Street, the new downtown complex?" I nodded once. "All 30 floors, luxury apartments, high-end retail, rooftop dining. The restaurant opens next month." James blinked. "That's $100 million project." "Closer to 150, I said, pulling up the documents, "and it's already 90% pre-leased." Rachel's phone slipped from her hand, clattering on the table. she whispered to James, stunned. She's not lying. Aurora Properties is everywhere. How did we miss this? Because none of you ever looked, I said. You were too busy watching me fail to notice I was succeeding. Mom finally found her voice. Barely. But, sweetheart, the way you live, your clothes, that old car. Because I reinvested everything, I explained, every cent. While James was buying sports cars, I was buying properties. James scoffed. With what money? You didn't have that kind of capital. I built it, slowly. I smiled, thinking of sleepless nights, late-night calls, spreadsheets and renovation tools. That first apartment building, I leveraged it into 2 more, then 5, then 10, each one paid for the next. While you were chasing status, I was building stability. I turned toward James. You have 4 houses, I have 400 tenants. Dad gently closed my laptop, his face unreadable. Why didn't you ever tell us? The question floated, thick with years of assumptions and condescension. Would you have listened? I said. 3 Thanksgivings ago, I tried to tell you about my first major commercial deal. You cut me off to rave about James's new BMW. Rachel looked down. We didn't know. No, I said, you didn't want to know. It was easier to believe I was struggling than admit I might be doing something right. James had stopped pacing, his face had shifted, no longer smug, but stunned, and maybe, a little intimidated. The signs, he said quietly. You said more go up tomorrow? I nodded. Every house on this block, except ours, will carry the Aurora name by morning. The neighborhood's being rezoned for mixed use. Mom gasped. You're tearing down the houses? Not tearing down, I said, transforming. Modern townhomes, boutique retail, walkable green spaces, property values will triple. I looked around the room. Including yours, if you stay. Dad's voice cracked. If we stay? I held his gaze. This house is the last piece. I'm making an offer, generous, well above market. The room fell into stunned silence. Their cozy family home, their long-standing view of me, both were now unsettled ground. James slowly sank into his chair. All this time, while we laughed at you. Mom looked at me, a new understanding dawning. You lived above that building to save money, not because you had to. I nodded. Smart investing isn't about looking rich, it's about becoming unshakable. I closed my laptop. The roast was cold. No one had touched it in ages. I'll have my team send over the offer, I said, walking to the door. Take your time. Sarah, Dad called, standing now. Wait. I turned. He looked shaken, like a man who'd just realized the rules of the game had changed and he'd never learned how to play. Yes? Your brother's lake house. I smiled. Is part of a waterfront acquisition Aurora's closing next month. I paused in the doorway. Funny how things turn out, isn't it? The next morning, my office buzzed with movement. Outside my window, the city shimmered, and across my old neighborhood, Aurora Properties signs bloomed like spring. My phone hadn't stopped since sunrise. Neighbors, reporters, city council. Then, family. Lisa, my assistant, stepped in. Miss Wilson, your brother's here. I looked up from the development plans spread across my desk. Send him in. James walked in. But the swagger was gone. He looked different bathed in the morning light of my corner office, smaller somehow, unsure in a way I'd never seen before. Nice place, James said, glancing at the panoramic skyline. How long have you had this office? 3 years, I replied, meeting his gaze. You never asked where I worked. He winced, running a hand through his hair. Yeah, about that. I've been thinking. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. Sit. I assume this is about the offer I sent? He nodded, lowering himself into the seat. 2 million over market. Mom and Dad are still stunned. I turned my screen to face him, showing the neighborhood redevelopment plans. In 18 months, this is what the block will look like. Townhouses. Cafes. Green spaces. A place people want to live, not just somewhere they end up. He leaned in, studying the renderings. It's incredible, Sarah. Honestly. Then, more quietly, I need to ask you something. Go ahead. That first apartment building, the one we mocked you for living in, was that really where it all started? I opened my desk drawer and pulled out an old photo. A crumbling building stared back, cracked windows, peeling paint, sagging steps. Everyone said I was insane to buy it. But I saw what it could be. I flipped to the after photo. Same building, now restored. Fresh paint. Warm brick. Window boxes in bloom. A waiting list just to rent a unit. That's Aurora's core belief, I said. Find what others overlook. Create value where no one's looking. Build more than just buildings, build belonging. James sat back, silent. I've been thinking about what you said last night, he finally murmured. About showing wealth versus building it. I bought that lake house to impress my partners. You built this because you believed in something real. It was never about money, I said. It was about meaning. And proving I could build something that mattered, on my terms. He hesitated, then asked, Does Mom have to move? If they sell, I pulled out a separate folder. These units here, premium townhouses with private gardens. I held one just for them. Family rate. He let out a short laugh. Not mocking, this time, it was disbelief wrapped in humility. A family discount. From their struggling daughter. Life's full of surprises. He walked to the window, looking down at the city. The Aurora signs shimmered in the early sun. You know the craziest part, he said. All those times we felt sorry for you. You probably could have bought my house 10 times over. 15, I said, smiling. But who's counting? He turned back to me. His face had changed. The smugness was gone. I was wrong about you, Sarah. All of us were. I'm sorry. The words landed with weight. Not just an apology, but a reckoning. A bridge. You know, I said, Aurora's expanding. Fast. I could use someone who knows real estate law, someone who wants to build something bigger than a vacation home. His brows rose. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you perspective. A seat at a table that builds futures, not just buys trophies. He looked around again, this time really seeing the space, the scale, the purpose. The sister I used to pity, is giving me a second chance. Sometimes, I said, rising to my feet, a few well-placed real estate signs are all it takes to teach humility. From the window, we watched the signs, Aurora's mark on the neighborhood and, now, on our family. So, I asked, extending my hand, ready to be part of something bigger than a lake house. James smiled and shook my hand. I think it's time I learned what real estate really means. As our hands clasped, I knew we'd sealed more than a business arrangement. Sometimes the most valuable things we build aren't the properties we own, but the people we finally understand. Welcome to Aurora Properties, I said. Let's build something worth keeping.